Hey, what's up guys? This is Mark, back with another fantasy football video. So this is week 4, game day, start sit. So I'm going to do a few questions from some fans, and then we'll kind of get into some poll questions from online forums that I've seen. This is comparing players side by side, so you have an idea of like who you want to start versus sit depending on who's on your roster. I don't really go game by game because one, that takes too long, and then two, you're not really like getting the best idea of how to compare who to start or who to sit to each other when you're just being told to start a bunch of people and you don't really have a lot of comparison by player. So this is supposed to kind of help you with that. So if you have questions, like feel free to let me know and I'll try to include it on the show. And yeah, so hopefully this helps you out for your game day. So I have a question first from Darren. He's wondering which of the running backs to start. He has Carlos Hyde, Frank Gore, and Tariq Cohen. So he's wondering who to start between those three. So I'm not too big on any of them for this week, but the one that I like the most among that group is Carlos Hyde. And I think that's a lot of it is because he is kind of establishing himself as the number one running back on this team. He's not an elite talent or anything like that, but he has the best matchup for one. And then two, he's got the clearest opportunity to get running back one volume in this game. So I like Carlos Hyde in this the most. I think you should go with him. Frank Gore came off a good week last week, but you know they were playing the Cincinnati Bengals in the last game. This game they got the New England Patriots, so you can't expect the same results there. Patriots defense has been shut down so far this season. And then in Chicago, Tariq Cohen has not established himself either. I would want to see Cohen actually like get some more involvement in the offense, not in the slot, but actually as the running back to kind of feel more comfortable playing him. And then they're playing Minnesota, which is a solid defense. So I think I would. You don't drop Tariq Cohen by any means, but I would not feel comfortable starting him. So in that order, I would go Hyde 1, Gore 2, and Cohen 3. So thanks, Darren. I appreciate your question. I hope that answered it, by the way. But yeah, thanks for commenting and giving me some topics to talk about on the show today. And then another fan had a question. His name is Claudio. He is wondering who to start and who to sit at his running back and wide receiver position. So in his running back, he's trying to pick two between Kerryon Johnson, Leonard Fournette, James Conner, and Joe Mixon. So in this, the way I would rank that personally is Kerryon Johnson, best matchup, Kansas City defense, probably going to get a lot of opportunity in this game, especially receiving the ball because they're going to be behind. So I like Kerryon Johnson the most, and I think that's mostly because of the fact they're playing the Kansas City Chiefs and they're going to need to really rely on him in the passing game as well. So I like Kerryon Johnson the most in this matchup. Then I like James Conner simply because the Pittsburgh Steelers line is better than the Bengals line. Bengals rush defense has been suspect this season. And I think James Conner, this is a game where he actually breaks out and plays better now that he's starting to get a little healthier. Joe Mixon, I think, could have a good game, but I'm not as high on him because, the Steelers, they haven't had a good pass defense, but rush defense-wise, they've been okay. And the Bengals have not done well running the ball this season. So I think for Joe Mixon, it's going to be like an average game, not anything standout or anything like that. But he's still a solid player that I would consider starting. But considering that you have Kerryon Johnson and Conner ahead of him, I would not start Joe Mixon. Leonard Fournette, I would rank last among that group because, one, they've got a matchup against Denver in Denver. So I want to see how Gardner Minshew does in that game. He's been doing very well so far, but I don't know if the Uncle Rico hype could be starting to get in his head and mess with him or whatever. I mean, he doesn't seem like a stuck-up guy, but he's never dealt with this type of fame before, and he's going into a pretty tough environment, despite the fact that Denver is not very good this season. I think that this could be a regression for the Jacksonville offense, especially with that long layover since their last game on Thursday last week. So I would not be surprised if Leonard Fournette has a down game in this game because defenses might try to focus on him. And then among your wide receivers, so Adam Thielen or Mike Evans. So those are tough calls because they both have difficult matchups. Thielen's playing Chicago and Evans is playing the Rams. But I would go Thielen personally in this matchup because I think pretty much like the way the Minnesota receiving offense has gone so far is that Kirk Cousins and Adam Thielen have the best rapport of any of his receiving options on that team. And I think that that's not going to change. The Bears, they don't necessarily give up. They're not giving up a lot of yards necessarily through passing, but they are giving up a lot of receptions in those kind of mid-range slot kind of areas where I think is an area that Thielen could dominate in. So I could see him, especially if you're in a PPR league, having a decent game just because of the catches he's going to get, but he might have a hard time scoring. So I would just keep that in mind. Mike Evans, I think, is more of a risk to be a bust just because of the way the Rams defense is, and also because the Buccaneers also rely on Chris Godwin. Maybe they'll get O.J. Howard involved. It's kind of hard to say. But, I just have a hard time seeing Thielen having as much of a complete shutout game as much as I do Mike Evans potentially. So I would start Thielen to have a safer bet in this game. Then we have some questions from some other fans that had some questions about what they should do. I had a question from Obi-Wan Kenobi who hit me up from Tatooine. He was wondering whether or not he should start DJ Moore or Darrell Williams in a full PPR league. So that's a tough call because, DJ Moore has an opportunity to really excel against the Houston pass defense. So I could potentially like him there, but Darrell Williams potentially getting the running back one job on the Chiefs. He had a great game last week, even though he didn't get a touchdown. So I could see him potentially exploding in this game because I don't know how healthy LaShawn McCoy is going to be. So I would go Darrell Williams, to be honest, because I think DJ Moore, he could have a good game, but also I could see, now that people are starting to get a scouting report on Kyle Allen, I could see him potentially struggling a little more in this game. DJ Moore, in fact, only had one catch in the last game, and it was a touchdown, so that basically saved his day. But, it seems like Curtis Samuel is getting more volume from Kyle Allen anyway, so I'm a little concerned about that going forward. All right, and then I have another question from Nicholas Cage. He was wondering whether or not he should start Phillip Lindsay, Wayne Gallman, or David Montgomery. So Phillip Lindsay's got a tough matchup going up against Jacksonville, but he is still getting good receiving volume. The number one guy that I like among that group actually is Wayne Gallman because going up against the Washington Redskins and just the fact that the Giants do not have a lot of other running back options. They only have one other healthy running back right now. Wayne Gallman could really have a huge game, and I like him over Phillip Lindsay because of the matchup that he has. And then David Montgomery going up against Minnesota. Minnesota has been very stout on defense against running backs. And I see that trend continuing, especially for a Chicago offense that has basically, for the most part, proven to be incompetent except when they played the Redskins because it's the Redskins. But so I would go Gallman 1, Phillip Lindsay 2, and then David Montgomery 3. And then the next question is coming from Tupac Shakur. So he's actually not dead because he gave me a call and asked about fantasy football. So, there's proof of that. So he's wondering whether or not he should start Ronald Jones or Kenyon Drake. So, because he has to pick one of the two. And, honestly, if you're down to that decision, I would just look at waivers because somebody might have not picked up Darrell Williams. Or somebody might have, be leaving somebody on the board like Rex Burkhead who could have a better game than any of those two. So keep an eye out on that. But if you're trying to pick between Ronald Jones and Kenyon Drake, I would almost go Drake just simply because I think that he could get a lot of volume just from receiving because Miami might just be dumping off to the running backs because they don't have the ability to go downfield against the Chargers. Ronald Jones has just got another horrendous matchup against the Rams, plus Peyton Barber being there. So, neither of them are good, but I slightly lean Kenyon Drake there. But, Kenyon Drake is getting to the point where he's borderline droppable. just because of that offense. And then my last question is from Antonio in Michigan. He says that he's new to fantasy football now that he's not playing anymore. He wants to know who to start among these four in a standard league: Leonard Fournette, Devontae Freeman, Wayne Gallman, or Darrell Williams. So I talked about Darrell Williams already. I like that start. But I honestly like Wayne Gallman a little more than Darrell Williams, just simply because Wayne volume is going to get 100% of the running back touches most likely, or near to it. Whereas Darrell Williams, he could potentially be splitting it with LaShawn McCoy. Maybe they start getting Darwin Thompson involved. Then I would go Leonard Fournette, but only slightly over Devontae Freeman. I think Devontae Freeman, I do want him to break free because I've been saying he's a buy low candidate, but against Tennessee, that might not happen this week. So, but I mean, I rank those two at the bottom. Fournette slightly above Freeman, but Wayne Gallman 1 and Darrell Williams 2. And then some other questions that I found on online forums that we'll get to. So, quarterback question: do you start Jared Goff or Daniel Jones? So Jared Goff is going up against the Buccaneers, which is a shaky pass defense. And then you have Daniel Jones going up against the Redskins. So I would go Daniel Jones because Jared Goff has had some up and down games this season. And yes, they played some solid defenses, but the Rams are trying to really balancing out their workload between running the ball and passing the ball. And Jared Goff seems to kind of, when they get down in the red zone, they're usually running the ball rather than passing it. So Goff is not really getting the touchdown volume that you would like. Whereas Daniel Jones is playing a team that's pass defense is just like a sieve. So, I honestly like Daniel Jones, even though he's the rookie in this game, just simply because he's playing the Redskins, which, I mean, look how they made Mitch Trubisky look last week. That's just pathetic. But anyway, so now a question here at PPR Flex Standard League: do you start DJ Moore, Josh Jacobs, or Terry McLaurin? And Terry McLaurin, so this is an important topic of debate because a lot of people really liked him going into this week, and I really did too against the Giants to really break free and have a huge game. But keep in mind, he pulled his hamstring on Thursday, so that is concerning to me going into the week. They're saying he's gonna play, but I would not be surprised if they really limit his snap count just to make sure he doesn't re-aggravate that injury. So I see huge bust potential with Terry McLaurin. I would personally rather leave him out for this week just because I'd rather not risk the chance that he just gives me a 0. But the matchup is really nice. I would only do that if you need a home run, you're behind your opponent because you started Nelson Aguilar or something like that. But just understand that could happen to Terry McLaurin too, where he has a very unproductive game just simply because he's dealing with an injury now. So, but DJ Moore, I think most consistent option, I would go that number 1. And then Josh Jacobs, I'd probably go 2, and then Terry McLaurin. But that's simply because of the injury risk. Josh Jacobs has got a relatively difficult matchup against the Colts. And he's not exactly stood out, but he is getting his opportunities. So that does work to his favor. So which one among the 4? Wayne Gallman, McCole Hardman, John Ross, or Darren Waller? So my number 1 among that group depends on whether or not you're in a standard or PPR league. If you're in a standard league, Wayne Gallman is my top among those 4. But if you're in a PPR league, I would go Darren Waller among the... I assume that's for a flex position, but I would go Darren Waller if it's PPR because he's going to catch a lot of passes because the offense is pretty much going to either Tyrell Williams or Darren Waller. Just look at last week, he had 13 for 134. That's a huge game in PPR. And then McCole Hardman, I would go next after those 2. And then John Ross. Because I think John Ross, McCole Hardman, because of that offense, I see him as more potential to get a touchdown. John Ross, I think, could get a touchdown. But then again, he reverted back to his Rick Ross form last week. So it's just it's hard for me to know the consistency of that guy. Whereas McCole Hardman, he's getting more involved in Kansas City's offense. I could see him having another decent game this week. And then standard league, do you start Leonard Fournette, Calvin Ridley, or Marquise Hollywood Brown. I don't know why they call him Hollywood, but anyway. So I would go Marquise Brown number 1 because I think that the number 1 receiver volume in this offense, and the Baltimore Ravens offense has been very good so far. So I would go with him. And then I would go Calvin Ridley simply because Ridley has a tougher matchup against the Titans. I like Ridley overall as a receiver more than Hollywood rest of the season, but for this week I like Marquise Brown over him. And then Leonard Fournette last for the reasons I already talked about earlier. So there was concern about Adam Thielen, but this person's wondering if you should start Adam Thielen or Chris Thompson. Like, do not be that concerned. Like, go Adam Thielen over Chris Thompson any day because Chris Thompson could have an explosive game, but he is not anywhere near the talent as Thielen. And Chris Thompson, he could, maybe if you're in a PPR and you're counting a bunch of receptions, but like, he's not even really standing out compared to Adrian Peterson so far. I would not go Chris Thompson over Thielen, but I do like Chris Thompson as a flex starter if you're in a pinch. And then I would start Chris Thompson over McLaurin for those injury risks that I talked about. And then if you're considering Thielen, Thompson, or Hardman, I would go Thielen, then Hardman, and then Chris Thompson. That's what I would do. All right, so John Ross, James White, DJ Chark, or Robert Woods. So Robert Woods has had 2 bad games the last few weeks, but I like Robert Woods for this to be a get-right game for him and for him to kind of get back on track. So I actually like Robert Woods over those other ones. Then I would go James White, just simply because, like James White, Patriots running back, as I talk about, they're always using a committee. So I could see James White potentially having a lower scoring game than it's anticipated. But he is my number 2 over Chark and Ross. I would go Chark 3, simply because I think Chark is looking good so far, but he's going to probably draw Chris Harris in this next game. Be interesting to see how he does there because I could see his numbers dipping. If he does well in this game, then that definitely puts him into flex consideration at least week by week basis. And then after that, I would go John Ross, simply because of too much up and down risk there as well. Mecole Hardman, Calvin Ridley, or Larry Fitzgerald full PPR. So I already talked about Ridley and Hardman, but Fitzgerald I actually like over those 2 because I think going up against Seattle, he's going to get a lot of passing yards and pass receptions from Kyler Murray. I see this game potentially being a shootout, and I see Larry Fitzgerald having a decent game. Not anything special, but it would probably be a better result than both Ridley and Hardman. All right, water break. So let's talk about trades for a sec. Then we'll get back to some start sits. So I've seen some trade options in some questions about offers people are getting. This person was offered Lamar Jackson and Mike Evans for Tyreek Hill, Cooper Kupp, and Tom Brady. So who wins that trade? So that is a very even trade, but personally, if you're getting Tyreek Hill and Cooper Kupp, like, I really like that. I think Cooper Kupp is really underrated. And you're selling Mike Evans after an excellent game, and then you look at his previous 2 games, not very good. So yeah, there is potentially you could see some up and down there as the season goes on. I like Lamar Jackson more than Tom Brady, though, but I mean, Brady, like, depending on the type of league that you're in, Brady is giving you some excellent value with just the amount of pass yards that they're getting, because that team is using their slot receptions and short yard passing game simply as the running game because it's more effective than Sony Michel. As I've been talking about, that guy is massively overrated. I don't know why nobody listened to me. But, and then, I'm just kidding, by the way. But, and then another trade offer, Le'Veon Bell for Aaron Jones and Christian Kirk. And that one is tough. I mean, if you're in a PPR, I would probably take Le'Veon Bell over them, but Aaron Jones is going to get a lot of opportunity. As I talked about in my last video, he's an excellent buy low candidate coming off of these first 4 weeks. And then Christian Kirk is another one that I think is stepping up into that wide receiver 1 role. This is a good example of buying people low. And I think that, like, if you're in a position where you're hurting at receiver, like, it actually might be beneficial to get Aaron Jones and Christian Kirk because Le'Veon Bell, everybody knows the type of talent that he is, but the New York Jets just look terrible. And until Sam Darnold gets back, it's probably going to be more of the same for them. So Le'Veon Bell really only has value if they're counting receptions, because he's going to get like 10 receptions for like 30 yards some games, just simply because of how inept that Jets offense is. And then another example of selling high, Mark Ingram for Melvin Gordon. I can't believe that was actually a trade offer. But like if you're in that position where like somebody's offering you Mark Ingram for Melvin, if somebody's offering you Melvin Gordon for Mark Ingram, then like you take that 100%, because Melvin Gordon, better offense, like he's gonna get like number one running back volume, both receiving and running. You wouldn't be concerned about Austin Eckler because they showed last year they could both work together in both have productive games. Take Melvin Gordon over Mark Ingram because I see Mark Ingram's value going down as the season goes on. Ravens also like to use a running back committee. It just hasn't fully developed yet. And then another trade. This one is really interesting to me. So Devontae Adams and Deshaun Watson for Patrick Mahomes and Tyler Lockett. I mean, Devontae Adams' health is concerning, but I would personally go the Adams and Watson route because Mahomes, I mean, he's top quarterback again, but he's pretty equal to Deshaun Watson for the most part. But Adams is a significant step up over Tyler Lockett, and I think Tyler Lockett's value might even go down as the season goes on. So personally, I would go with the Adams and Watkins route as the winner of that trade. But very interesting, depending on how you think the Seahawks receiving core is going to develop through the season. So we talked about the Seahawks just there. Let's get to the other Seahawks receiver, DK Metcalf. Somebody's wondering whether they should start him, DJ Chark, or Adrian Peterson. So in my opinion, like, just stay away from Adrian Peterson as much as you can. Just simply because like he's at the end of his career, and I don't see him. He's had some games last year where he exploded, and yes, like they're playing the Giants, but I just don't see it happening. And then, so he's last to me. And then I would go DJ Chark. Then I would go DK Metcalf, because DK Metcalf against the Cardinals have not looked good on defense so far. They just made Kyle Allen look like a Patrick Mahomes, which, I mean, that's saying something right there. So DK Metcalf could go off in this game. And I think that this is his opportunity to really like break into the scene this week. People will be talking about him as an underrated wide receiver pickup if he's still on waivers. So this is an interesting one. Do you start Stephon Diggs or Paris Campbell? So do you go with the opportunity of T.Y. Hilton being out and Paris Campbell stepping up and producing elite receiver value, or Stephon Diggs, who's the proven receiver but has not been good this season? And that is very tough. But to me, like, both those players are very risky to start. But I see more risk with Paris Campbell. Because, yes, he is the most talented of the receivers left. He could step up. But I could also see them going more to either their two tight ends, Ebron or Doyle, Zach Pascal, Deion Kane, something like that. But Stephon Diggs, for as bad as he's been playing, he's still pretty clearly wide receiver number 2 on that team. And I think that he could still catch a lot of, maybe especially PPR, I could see him catching a lot of slot passes against the Bears. Don't really give you a lot of yards, but could give you a lot of points by reception. So go Stephon Diggs in that example, just because less risk involved with him, even in spite of how he's playing. All right, so about 5 minutes left. So pick 2 to sit among this group. Terry McLaurin, Cooper Kupp, Odell Beckham. I don't even know why that would be a question to sit Odell. Marquise Brown, McCole Hardman, or Tyler Boyd. So yeah, I would sit McLaurin. I already talked about that. Injury risk is concerning, especially late week injury. Cooper Kupp, you start. Odell Beckham Jr., you start. Marquise Brown, you start in spite of the way that game went last week. I would sit McCole Hardman because I think, as I talked about a few videos ago, Chiefs wide receivers like Demarcus Robinson and McCole Hardman, they tend to split explosive games with each other, and I could see them potentially having a bust game, even though they both looked pretty good last week. But I would feel more comfortable sitting him compared to these other guys. Tyler Boyd I would start, but he is the last of the 4 that I would put in among that group. And then the other Chiefs wide receiver, Demarcus Robinson. Do you start him in a PPR, or do you start McCole Hardman, Amari Cooper, or Terry McLaurin? So I would start Amari Cooper against the Saints. You know, he's dealing with injuries, but I still like Amari Cooper talent-wise. It's close to me between Robinson and Hardman, but I would go Robinson just simply because he's still got a lot of volume in the last game. He's starting to show some sample size of still being a pretty good player. McCole Hardman still only had 2 catches, even though one of them was an 83-yard touchdown. So go DeMarcus Robinson over McCole Hardman. And then Terry McLaurin, I'd sit him. I've already talked about that. I mean, unless you're like down by a lot, like I would, the general theme is sit Terry McLaurin. That's what I'm doing personally. That's, I hope if you don't take away anything else from this, that's the big thing I want to say, is that these late week injuries, they're concerning with how these players could produce on the field and whether or not they'll play a lot. Robert Woods or Sterling Shepard. So I said this could be a bounce back game for Woods, but I like Sterling Shepard more just simply because he's playing the Redskins. Probably going to get a lot of volume from Daniel Jones. Sterling Shepard, you start over Robert Woods if you're given the choice. Julian Edelman, Christian Kirk, or DJ Moore. So Edelman against the Bills. He's going to get a lot of volume just because it's Tom Brady. Christian Kirk, I think, could also have a very good game. And then DJ Moore. So they're all worthy of starting, but personally, I would go offense. I'd go Julian Edelman 1. Then I would go, it's close between Kirk and DJ Moore, but I would go Kirk and then DJ Moore just simply because this, like, Kyler Murray against Seattle, I think, is going to have a good game. Could get the ball a lot to Christian Kirk, whereas I could see Kyle Allen struggling a little more in his second NFL start. And then Joe Mixon, Chris Carson, or Chris Godwin in a PPR league are trying to pick a running back 2 and a flex. And I would go the 2 running backs there. I would go Mixon and Carson. Godwin, I think, in a typical play, I would say to start Chris Godwin, but considering that they're playing the Rams, I could see this being a game where he struggles a little bit. But I like Mixon and Carson to step up, especially considering that Mixon, for one, doesn't really have a backup running back that threats his time unless you still consider Gio Bernard that. Chris Carson, Rashad Penny is hurt, so they're going to go primarily through Chris Carson. Chris Godwin, I think, could struggle the most, so I would go Mixon and Carson. Kenny Golladay or Mike Evans. Kenny Golladay had a down week last week, but against the Chiefs, I see him really bouncing back this week in a big way. He was a buy low candidate that I talked about. And I think that I would go him over Mike Evans, given Mike Evans is playing the Rams. Last question. Do you start a tight end question? Do you start Darren Waller or Will Disley in a standard league? So that's a tough one in standard. I think in PPR you would definitely go Waller, but in standard I would actually go Disley there because I think there's more likelihood the Seahawks get a touchdown against the Cardinals. The Cardinals especially are struggling against tight ends, so I think Disley could be one of those guys getting a touchdown this week from Russell Wilson. Whereas, Darren Waller against the Colts, I think the Colts defense is still underrated, and I think Waller, I don't see him getting into the end zone as likely as Disley would. So yeah, that's my start-sit video for game day this week. Hope this helped. I apologize if I didn't get to your questions early enough, but I'll try to do my best to see if I can try to answer questions as you can. And feel free to comment, because I really want to try to help you guys out. And if you put your comments below, I'll do my best to include in the show. I got half an hour. So good luck this week, and thanks for watching and for support. So cool. See you guys. Bye.